You're sitting in a job interview waiting room. Plastic chairs. Bad lighting. Somebody's stressed tapping a pen 2 seats down. Your phone's at 3%. You cross your fingers behind your back anyway, just in case. You don't believe in luck. Not really. You still do it every single time. You've probably got a lucky shirt somewhere, or a specific playlist for exams, or a route you always drive. Just because it worked once. 50,000 years ago, someone crouched in a pitch-black cave, working by firelight alone. They painted a bison in red ochre, then pressed a human hand flat beside it. Same impulse, same species, same shaking off the uncertainty move you just made in that waiting room. Somewhere between a campfire and a candidate profile, humans started whispering to the universe, asking it to bend a little in their favor. Nobody's ever fully explained why. And the real answer is stranger than primitive people just didn't understand science. This isn't a story about dumb cavemen throwing bones at the sky. It's about a wiring problem. One baked into every human brain. Yours included. By the end of this, you'll know the actual, testable reason people started believing in magic in the first place. You'll also find out why you, a rational adult with a smartphone and a calendar app, still knock on wood before saying something out loud. Or why you avoid the number 13. Just to be safe. It's not superstition. It's software. Let's talk about the oldest solid evidence we've got. In Blombos Cave on the southern coast of South Africa, archaeologist Christopher Henshelwood found something odd back in the 1990s. Pieces of ochre. A soft, reddish stone, scratched with deliberate cross-hatched lines. Not random scrapes. A pattern. Repeated, on purpose. Dated to roughly 77,000 years ago. Published in the journal Science in 2002. Henshelwood's team had been excavating that cave for years by then, layer by careful layer. Over time, they pulled thousands of ochre fragments out of the sand. Most were unremarkable. Just raw lumps of stone. A handful weren't. Those cross-hatched pieces stood out because the lines didn't wander. They repeated, evenly spaced, like someone practicing the same design on purpose, over and over, until it looked right. Then, in 2011, the same team found something even stranger nearby. 2 abalone shells, used as mixing containers. Ochre residue caked inside, along with charcoal and crushed bone. A full paint-making toolkit, dated to roughly 100,000 years old. A literal workshop, tucked in the back of a cave. Published again in Science. Someone had a recipe, and kept using it long enough to leave a mess behind. Here's the thing. Ochre is basically useless on its own. You can't eat it. You can't cook with it. You definitely can't sharpen a spear with it. Red does one thing extremely well, though. It looks like blood. So why were early humans grinding it into powder? Mixing it with fat and charcoal? Carrying that recipe around and refining it for tens of thousands of years? One clue sits 6,000 kilometers north in Kafsa Cave, Israel. Researcher Arella Hovers and her team studied burials there, dated to around 100,000 years old. They found ochre pieces buried directly with the bodies, deliberately placed, not scattered by accident. Published in the journal Current Anthropology in 2003. The ochre wasn't functional. It was symbolic. Color, applied to death. Completely on purpose. Put those sites together, and something wild appears. Humans were assigning meaning to a plain rock over 70,000 years before writing existed, before agriculture, before permanent houses, before anything you'd call civilization. They were already doing something your brain still recognizes, turning an ordinary object into a symbol, one that means more than the object itself. And Blombos isn't some lucky one off, either. Deliberate ochre use like this shows up at dozens of Middle Stone Age sites across Africa, not just one cave. That, right there, is the entire seed of magic. Not a spell. Not a chant. Just a quiet belief that treating a thing right will change your odds. And this is the tame version. A scratched rock and a jar of paint. Keep that in mind, because the evidence only gets stranger from here. Now here's the complication. The easy explanation is that ancient people believed in magic because they were ignorant. No science, no real explanations, so they made stuff up to feel less afraid. It's a comforting story. It's also wrong. Or at least badly incomplete. In 1948, psychologist B.F. Skinner ran an experiment on pigeons. He built a box that dropped food at completely random intervals. Nothing the pigeon did mattered. It didn't matter, but the pigeons developed rituals anyway. One kept spinning in circles before every feeding. Another bobbed its head into a corner, again and again, like clockwork. Each bird had stumbled into some random movement right before food appeared once. Its brain locked onto that movement as the cause, and never let go. Skinner published it in the Journal of Experimental Psychology. Pigeons, genuinely inventing magic. Humans do the exact same thing, and psychologists have caught us at it too. In 1975, Ellen Langer ran a simple study. She let one group of people pick their own lottery numbers. Another group just got handed random numbers. Same odds. Exactly. Either way, no difference at all mathematically. But the people who picked their own numbers valued their tickets far higher. Some refused to sell them, even for a profit. She called it the illusion of control. It's the same pigeon logic, wearing a suit. You've done a version of it yourself, probably this week, refreshing an email inbox over and over. Like refreshing it might change what's inside. So this was never really an ignorance problem. It's a pattern recognition problem. And it runs far deeper than the Stone Age. Your brain is a machine built to spot cause and effect. Fast, on minimal evidence. Because for most of human history, hesitation got you killed. A rustle in the grass was probably just wind. But the ancestor who assumed maybe a lion and ran survived more often. The one who calmly waited around for proof, weighing the odds like a scientist, sometimes didn't survive at all. In other words, magic isn't what happens when reasoning breaks down. It's what happens when reasoning works exactly the way it's supposed to. Just aimed at the wrong target over and over for good evolutionary reasons. This wiring might not even be a purely modern human invention. So if it's only brain wiring, why does the physical evidence go back so absurdly far? Stick with this one. The timeline is about to get uncomfortable. In the 1950s and 60s, archaeologist Ralph Selecki excavated Shanidar Cave, tucked into the Zagros Mountains of northern Iraq. He uncovered a Neanderthal skeleton, dated to roughly 60,000 years old, surrounded by clusters of flower pollen. His team identified pollen from yarrow, cornflower, and hollyhock, clustered specifically around the body, not spread randomly through the soil, the way wind-blown pollen normally settles. He published it in Science in 1975 and called it the flower burial. Selecki's team had actually found 9 different Neanderthal skeletons at Shanidar over several excavation seasons. This particular one, catalogued as Shanidar 4th, became the most argued about of them all. The headline basically wrote itself. Neanderthals, grieving with bouquets. Except, and this part matters, later researchers pushed back hard. In 1999, archaeologist Jeffrey Sommer re-examined the site. He argued the pollen could easily have come from burrowing rodents, animals that stash seeds underground and love nesting in caves. That debate is still genuinely open today. Nobody's fully settled it either way, and a good channel tells you that instead of pretending the case is closed. That uncertainty is worth sitting with, honestly, because it's the truthful part. Absence of proof isn't proof of absence. But it's not proof of flowers either. What is solid, though, is this. Neanderthals at multiple sites, not just Shanidar, were burying their dead on purpose, curled into resting positions, sometimes with stone tools placed carefully beside them. Whatever the flowers were or weren't, something was happening around death that went beyond simple disposal. You don't curl a body into a resting pose. and add objects, unless that body still means something to you. Let's talk about jewelry for a second, because this next one is wild. Krapina, in modern-day Croatia, isn't some minor footnote site either. Paleontologist Dragutin Gorjanovi-Kramberger started digging there back in 1899. He eventually pulled out more than 800 Neanderthal bone fragments, one of the largest such collections ever found in one place. Buried, among all of it, 8 white-tailed eagle talons, dated to around 130,000 years old. That's tens of thousands of years before modern humans even reached Europe. In 2015, Croatian archaeologist Davorka Radovi, working with anthropologist David Freyer, published a full analysis in the journal PLOS ONE. The talons had cut marks, Polish, notches in the exact spots you'd need to string them together on a cord. Not hunting damage. Not butchery marks. Assembly marks, in the right places, repeated across all 8 claws, like someone had a method. Somebody made a necklace. Or maybe a bracelet. Hundreds of centuries before anyone we'd recognize as fully modern existed. Eagles aren't easy prey. Either, you don't casually snatch talons off a live raptor without a serious fight. Somebody worked hard for that bird. Then turned its claws into something worn on a body. Not eaten. Not used as a tool for anything practical at all. That's not survival behavior. That's arguably the very first fashion statement on record. And fashion, historically, is rarely just decoration. It's a signal. Status, protection, a visible claim on the animal's power, worn like a piece of it never quite let go. It probably hung around someone's neck for the rest of their life. So why carve a monster instead of a person? Hold that thought. You're about to see why that's not a coincidence at all. In 1939, in Hohlenstein-Stadel cave in southern Germany, archaeologists found hundreds of tiny mammoth ivory fragments scattered in the dirt. World War II broke out just days later. The pieces sat unassembled in storage for decades, forgotten in drawers. It wasn't until the late 1960s, with further reassembly work stretching through the 1980s, that researchers even understood what they had. A full restoration, published in the journal Quarter in 2014, finally confirmed the shape. A 12-inch ivory figure with a human body and a lion's head. Radiocarbon dated to roughly 40,000 years old. The Lion Man. It's not a hunting trophy. It's not a child's toy. It's a body that is deliberately both things at once. Human and predator, fused on purpose. Carved with real skill, using nothing but stone tools, over what must have been hundreds of hours of slow, patient work. Researchers studying the figure keep pointing toward one specific idea: transformation. The belief that a person, under the right ritual conditions, could actually become something else. An animal. A spirit. A predator wearing a human's shape, or a human borrowing a predator's power. Nobody carved something that complicated by accident. That's not a random craft project sitting in a drawer somewhere. Similar carved figures, fertility symbols, and animal hybrids alike keep turning up across Ice Age Europe, some over 25,000 years old, found everywhere from France to Siberia. Whatever this belief was, it wasn't a local trend. It traveled. Human-animal hybrids especially keep resurfacing in later cultures too, from Egyptian gods with jackal heads to Greek minotaurs. The Lion Man is simply the earliest one we've found, the oldest known physical evidence of a belief that would shape religion for tens of thousands of years afterward. The idea that the line between human and something more than human isn't fixed. It can be crossed, if you know how to ask, or how to carve. Now here's the part that actually broke a few textbooks. For decades, archaeologists assumed a specific order of operations. Humans settle down first. They farm crops, build up surplus food, and only then, once life gets a little easier, invent religion and start building monuments. Practical stuff first. Spiritual stuff later, treated almost like a luxury item you earn. Then, starting in 1995, archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began excavating a hill in southeastern Turkey called Gobekli Tepe. What he found flipped that whole timeline upside down. Massive T-shaped limestone pillars, some over 5 meters tall, weighing many tons each, arranged in wide stone circles, some pillars even carved with stylized arms and hands, like abstract human figures standing guard. Carved with foxes, scorpions, snakes, and vultures too, worked with nothing but stone tools and raw manpower. Radiocarbon dated to around 9600 BC, roughly 11,600 years old. That's thousands of years before Stonehenge. Thousands of years before the pyramids at Giza were even conceived. Schmidt summarized the findings himself in a 2010 paper in the journal Documenta Praehistorica. Here's the genuinely wild part. There was no agriculture yet, anywhere nearby. No pottery. No domesticated animals. The people who built Göbekli Tepe were full-time hunter-gatherers, moving with the seasons, with basically zero surplus food to spare for side projects. And they still organized enough labor to quarry, carve, and haul stones the weight of a city bus, for a site that shows almost no evidence of ever being lived in year-round. Sit with that for a second. Hunter-gatherers, with no permanent homes and no farms, pulled off a construction project that size, purely for ritual. No blueprints, no metal tools, no wheels even, just belief. And enough people who shared that belief to make the stone move, block by block, season after season. One of the pillars at the site, catalogued as Pillar 43, is covered in carvings of vultures, scorpions, and a headless human figure. Some researchers have proposed it might even encode a specific event, using the animals like a kind of calendar. That reading is genuinely disputed, and plenty of archaeologists push back on it hard. But even the skeptics agree on one basic point. Whoever carved Pillar 43 was recording something on purpose. Not just decorating a rock for fun. They built a temple before they ever built a farm. That single fact quietly rewires the whole magic came from ignorance, and civilization outgrew it story. Schmidt himself argued something close to the opposite. Shared ritual, he suggested, may have been the reason scattered groups gathered in large numbers at all. That happened long before farming gave anyone a practical reason to settle down. Belief came first. Everything practical followed behind it, almost as an afterthought. So here's the mechanism that actually ties this whole thing together. Cognitive scientist Justin Barrett named it in a 2000 paper in Trends in Cognitive Sciences, the Hyperactive Agency Detection Device, or HAD for short. Human brains are tuned to assume somebody did this faster than they're tuned to assume nothing did this. It's a leftover survival setting. Assuming a rustling bush is a predator costs you almost nothing, if you're wrong. Assuming it's just wind costs you your life, if you're wrong the other way. So, brains default to agency. Constantly, somebody's out there. Something wants something. It's part of why archaeologist David Lewis Williams made an odd observation in a 2002 book called The Mind in the Cave. So much ancient art, he pointed out, sits in the deepest, hardest to reach chambers of a cave system, not the entrance, where anyone could see it. The far back, reachable only by crawling through absolute darkness. He proposed those spaces were used for deliberate trance states, entered by religious specialists on purpose. Not decoration. A destination. Now stack that onto a second, older idea. Anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski spent years living among the Trobriand Islanders in the early 1900s. He noticed something specific, later published in his 1948 book, Magic, Science, and Religion. Islanders fishing in the calm, predictable lagoon used almost no magic rituals at all. Skill and experience were simply enough there. But islanders heading out into the open ocean were different. Out there, absolutely anything could go wrong, so they loaded up on chance, charms, and ceremonies before they ever left shore. Same people, same skill level, a completely different amount of magic depending entirely on how much uncertainty they were walking into that day. You've genuinely seen this exact pattern before, even if you didn't know it had a name. Anthropologist George Melk tested it on professional baseball players back in 1971. Pitchers, whose success swings wildly on tiny, uncontrollable factors, pile on rituals, lucky socks, fixed pregame routines, never stepping on the foul line. Infielders, whose plays are far more mechanical and repeatable, barely bother with any of it. Same sport. Same skill level, roughly, wildly different amounts of magic. Depending entirely on how much the outcome could randomly blow up in someone's face. Here's what makes this more than a coincidence. None of these groups were copying each other. The Trobriand Islanders and 1970s baseball pitchers never met. Neither one ever heard of Blombo's cave. Cultures separated by oceans and tens of thousands of years independently kept landing on the exact same behavior. That's usually a sign you're not looking at a tradition passed down. You're looking at a shared piece of hardware, doing exactly what it evolved to do in every brain that has ever run it. It's the same reason good luck still gets said out loud, and break a leg still gets said backstage, in a theater full of otherwise rational adults. Put Barrett, Malinowski, and G. Melch together, and you get the actual answer. Magic was never a knowledge gap. It's what a brain, wired to detect invisible agents, does when it's staring down a situation it genuinely can't control. Ochre placed on a corpse, a lion-headed figure carved from ivory, a temple raised before farming even existed, lucky socks on a pitcher's mound. All of it. Quiet attempts to negotiate with an uncertain world, using the one tool the brain reaches for first. The assumption that something, somewhere, might be listening and might be talked into helping. Which brings us right back to that waiting room. You crossed your fingers over a job outcome you genuinely can't control. Someone in Blombo's cave scratched lines into ochre they probably couldn't fully explain either. Someone in a German cave carved a lion's head onto a human body, hoping the fusion might help somehow. Someone at Gobekli Tepe raised an 11,600-year-old pillar to a fox they would never tame. Different centuries. Completely different tools. Same exact brain underneath it all. Same hyperactive little voice, insisting that something out there is listening, and that it might just be persuadable. So the next time you knock on wood, or dodge a crack in the sidewalk, or refuse to change your lucky seat before a big game, that's not silliness. That's roughly 100,000 years of ancestors, quietly running the same program you're running right now. In a waiting room, on a random Tuesday, 3% battery and all. The cave paintings just had better lighting. Drop your own weird superstition in the comments below. Somebody 70,000 years ago probably had a version of it too. You're still crossing your fingers.